guys, we have someone I haven't really met, but I was introduced to him. He does amazing work. His name is Joseph Scaramucci. His team takes care of human trafficking. So, Joseph, why don't you explain better to my audience what you do and how it happens?
Yeah, so currently I'm the director of law enforcement engagement for an organization called Skull Games. I'm still active law enforcement, have been policing right at 20 years. I did about 7 years of death and sex crime investigations, and about the last 10 I've spent in counter human trafficking. So our unit was built in 2014. With that, though, there's been two of us who have spent about the last 9 years actively pursuing trafficking investigations. We've arrested more than 670 sex buyers,
Wow.
about 200 people that were looking to engage in sexual acts with children, about 170 traffickers we've arrested and engaged, and identified about 280 victims of human trafficking.
So Joseph, I normally go into what the organization does and the victims and so on. But I think in this interview, I would like you to help us understand more about the different aspects of trafficking, or I should say, different aspects of human trafficking.
Child sex trafficking is what garnishes the most attention. I don't personally, anecdotally, believe there's as much minor sex trafficking as there is adult sex trafficking. Uh, when we look at as a whole, what is trafficking, we can include labor trafficking. That I think is kind of the unknown beast. That's very difficult to identify, even if we have the known venues for that. Oftentimes, as with sex trafficking, most victims don't identify as being a victim of trafficking, especially in labor, because they're receiving a benefit, right? They're receiving pay, although it's not substantial. It's not even acceptable pay, but oftentimes from their home country, it is a substantial check. So we see that quite a bit. As a whole, sex and labor trafficking are the two largest within the U.S.
How do you even know where to identify where this is happening?
Overwhelming majority of sex trafficking is now occurring on the internet, right? Which really simplifies our job to some degree. Using technology, using data, using just built intelligence on traffickers is really how we target them. You always have a start point if it's posted to the internet. There's always somewhere to start, whether it be through searching phone numbers, whether it be through identifying who the people are and getting positive identification on them. There's a ton of different ways that we can use as our go point. And then from there, it's really just using the technology that we have, the data that we have, and then proprietary databases, whether it be law enforcement or not, to really target the traffickers themselves.
The traffickers are the ones that have a girl or a guy, and they may have multiple girls and
Mhm.
guys, and their job is to do what on the internet?
I mean, as much as I hate to say it this way, it's to sell a product, and unfortunately, that product is human beings. So
Can
it's
can the human beings themselves not sell themselves if they were voluntarily doing it?
I mean that's a multifaceted answer, right? Most women don't wake up one day and decide to sell sex. They don't decide to sell their body. So the middleman is the con man who, is the fox that gets them to believe that that's what they want to do or do that for them. I say them as a quote couple, even though the couple theory is just garbage. Um, but it's manipulation, it's mind games. It's literally where we get our name Skull Games from. There's a well-known pimp that says traffic or pimping is not a sex game, it's a skull game. So could they do it on their own? Of course. Is that something most women strive to do on a Friday? No, it's not.
What is the percentage you think of women who are or men who are forced to do this? or I should I say forced? Should I use the word forced or convinced? Is that a better word? Convinced to do this?
Yeah, force implies some kind of physical force, right? Coercion is where we see it the overwhelming majority of the time. So coerced. Um, what is the percentage that's forced, coerced, defrauded? There's some differing numbers out there. Some of the best that I've seen is about 85 to 92% of all people engaged in third or in commercial sex are actually under third party control. So it's a very large number. When we talk about quote sex work or these people that are quote doing it because they want, that's insignificant. It's one of 10, and you can't convince me that those people want to do it anyway. They may have themselves convinced of it, but that's is what it is.
How is it that they control these? Should I call them victims or should I call them?
I would say victims. If they're actively being trafficked, then of course, yeah, I would say victims.
How do pimps know where to target a girl so they can get her to work for them?
For one of the biggest is social media. That's still to this day one of the largest recruiting grounds that there are. So is commercial sex. So if you have a woman that is, say, stripping as an example, the traffickers may go there to try to recruit. When you look at social media as a whole, both traffickers and trafficking victims and survivors post a lot of stuff to the internet. So do the overwhelming majority of most people. So if I'm a trafficker, I can sit back and do a few things. One is share the life that I'm living, whether it be popping champagne with my jewelry and driving a Lexus and making everything look like this big bolsterous, like, look at all the things I have and can do. And at the same breath, you have a potential victim who's posting, say, on social media, that they need help because Christmas is coming. They need help because they're trying to get through the holidays. They need help because they got laid off of a job. They need help because of, and then this is where in basic terms, some asshole comes along and sees this on social media, and then is like, "Hey, I have something we can do to fix this. I'll be your boyfriend." So now we've got this boyfriending, we've got this befriending, this trust being built, and then boom, here we cycle into the actual trafficking and commercial sex.
How long does it take to be the fake boyfriend?
I've seen everything from months to hours.
And once you have convinced the victim that I am the one you should trust, now how do you convince her to go sleep with someone else?
What I'm told by survivors and what I've personally seen is you're having sex anyway, you might as well make money. Um, we've seen we need, say, $3,000 to get ourselves out of this financial pinch. If you do this for us, once this is done, you'll never need to do it again. You're having sex anyway, you might as well make some money doing it. It's those type things, it's desensitizing, whether that be going and starting to engage in strip clubs and then like get you to engage in commercial sex at the strip clubs and then get you to turn a trick or meet a friend or whatever that may be, and then it's just a snowball effect that doesn't stop.
How does your agency target these operations and what do they face? Jail time or
A lot of agencies target potential sex workers, victims, whatever you want to say, person involved in commercial sex, right? They will target them, try to roll them like they do dope. It doesn't work. It's antiquated. This is the only crime in anybody's penal code that the victim actually goes to jail for. So we focus specifically on traffickers, and in that is building out, again, intelligence, the same as what we would do targeting packets on anybody that we're specifically and narrowly looking for. And then once we find them, yeah, we roll them in our cases, whether that be through warrants, whether that be through undercover operations. It all just depends. And again, it depends on the charge, right? So in the state of Texas, if you traffic 2 or more women, I don't have to prove force, fraud, coercion. All I have to prove is promotion of prostitution, and that's up to a life sentence. If we have
life
threats, that's
sentence?
up to life, yes, for just promoting 2 women.
And
Uh,
they still have the nerve to do it.
Yeah, because what's the cost versus risk, right? Most trafficking units are arresting women for prostitution, and they're not even getting to
The
the
traffickers.
trafficker, right? So they lose nothing. I don't lose anything. You go to jail for your misdemeanor, I bond you out, we move on. So it's
So
a huge deterrent.
can't the prostitute point out to the traffickers?
Yeah, but they 9 out of 10 times won't.
Why is that?
Coercion, right? Same reason women don't leave domestic violence situations. Same reason why, traffickers are made the truth teller. So when we look at it, the trafficker's saying, hey, look, they're not going to come for me, they're going to come for you. When they come for you, it's this low level misdemeanor. Don't say my name. I'll bond you out. We'll be good to go. Never have another problem. It's only going to cost like a couple $100. Law enforcement then comes along, and instead of targeting the trafficker, they target the trafficking victim. They ask her, hey, do you need help? Like, are you being trafficked? Right? Her answer is no, because I know if I don't say anything, he's going to bond me out. I'll be done in 2 hours. We're good. So with that happening, we as law enforcement just made the trafficker the truth teller. We're empowering him. We're making what he says right.
Right.
So that really prohibits and hinders the women from coming forward because he's right. Even the cops are saying he's right. Right? Who do I go to for help now?
Is that one of the reasons why the bond they choose to have a bond with the trafficker versus the police department?
Yeah, it's a trauma bond, right? I don't know that it's necessarily a choice. It's kind of a no brainer when you look at it from the perspective of the victim or survivor.
These victims are quote unquote safer with their with their
Trafficker.
pimps, with their traffickers.
Am I saying they are? No.
I'm asking
Obviously,
you.
they're not.
They're not.
But the perception that they have is that they are, right? Um, but that's by design. That's by design of the trafficker. That's by design of the system that they've implemented. I mean, it's supposed to be that way in the game and in what's going on.
I
In
see.
reality, no. Would I much rather a trafficking survivor or victim come to me and be like, I need help? A million times over, right? And
So let's talk about that. How does a victim come over to your agency?
the majority of where we intersect the most is either through sting operations or unknowingly through traffic stops where a patrol officer uh, makes a random traffic stop and they don't know that they're dealing with a trafficker and trafficking victim. We have had some success with that. I actually go to a trial. I'll be in trial here in 2 weeks on a trafficker that came about because of a traffic stop. And I just assisted an agency in the Panhandle who had a traffic stop that was like, hey, we think this is trafficking, and it was. But even those are a fraction. The primary kind of overlap is going to be through sting operations.
So how do you set up a sting operation?
We're going to target the trafficker. So once I can target the trafficker themselves, um, it could be that we try to get them to come to a hotel or a place that we have. We may go to where they're at. It just completely depends on.
Your agency will pretend to be the victim.
Yeah, in those instances, we will pretend to be a sex buyer who's looking to purchase the victim, because that's where we will intercept the trafficker and or the trafficking victim / survivor when we're able to communicate with them and be like, hey, we know what's going on. We're here to help you. If they take it, they take it. More often than times they don't, but that's the goal.
Do you have agencies that, um, after you have gone and done the bust, will go and support these victims to stand up on their own feet and live a normal life?
The one that we primarily work with here in Waco is called Unbound. We don't do sting operations without them present. So I would never do one in a hotel without them in the adjoining room. I would never do one where I'm going to the potential victim without them being either in the truck or immediately behind us. Um, Unfortunately, most of the time the women don't accept the help. but it is there, it is available for them. I don't care if we have to intersect 10 times. If it's the 10th or 11th time that you say, hey, I need help, then we're here for that the 11th time.
This is law enforcement we're talking about, Joseph. Do
Mhm.
you think that we can have um, control over the internet to stop this?
No, it was the same. It was the same when the federal government shut down Backpage. That was
Yeah,
idiotic. It
yeah,
did nothing. It made it. I mean, that was fine and well in theory,
but it
but it
doesn't.
did nothing to end trafficking. It just shifted. It changed venue the next day. It went to other websites that were already in existence. It went to apps, whether it be dating apps or whatever. Uh, Controlling the internet literally does nothing to stop trafficking other than make people who do it feel good about themselves, in my opinion.
And do it somewhere else.
Of course. Yeah, so if we'll use an example right now, we'll just say Backpage was live and well, right? Shut it down today. Okay, I'm gonna move to a different website tomorrow. You didn't stop it, you just changed where it was. And unfortunately it made it more difficult because a lot of these websites moved overseas. Backpage was based in Dallas. So a lot of these websites are overseas, and if they're not compliant with subpoenas, they're not compliant, and there's not a lot we can do about it.
They operate from overseas within the United States or even overseas as well, and you don't have jurisdiction to go get them there.
Oh, there are a couple of websites that do assist law enforcement. They will work with us. I'd rather not name them because I don't want people looking them up. But there are websites that do cooperate with American law enforcement, and for that, I'm extremely appreciative of them. But if they chose not to, we'd be dead in the water.
When you are in China, you can purchase anything from Amazon. They have the whole country. You cannot purchase anything from Amazon, and some way or the other, they have got that in control. Can we
But
do
do
that?
they?
Yeah, they do.
I don't know, but do they? I can get on SnapMap and look at people's Snapchats in North Korea.
Well, you would know more about that. I don't.
I
I'm told that in China you cannot buy anything from Amazon. So why is it that in America you can buy sex from a website from overseas?
I guarantee you, people are enjoying Amazon in China. I mean, where there's a will, there's a way, right? If you're going
Right,
to tell me you can no longer do this in the United States, you can no longer access this from the United States, I'm going to get on a VPN out of Mexico. Good luck.
right,
Right. So,
right.
same thing with it. I've been in many foreign countries, um, that what's the word that, close the internet. As an example, Amazon. I can still get on Amazon. That's not hard. I can get on any website I want from any place in the world that I want. Is it easy? Not always, obviously, but again, I can get on plenty of websites right now and watch current real-time events in North Korea, Afghanistan, you name it. I can watch them. So we can censor the internet, but it doesn't do a ton. There's always a will to beat. There's always a way to beat it.
So I was in Linton, North Dakota, filming, and it's a small little town. It has like 600 people that live over there. So there's only one gas station. So I go to the gas station. I make friends with the manager, and I think it was 2 days or 3 days before I left. She comes over. I was there, and she's like, you should do something about this because there was a 15-year-old girl who was having a conversation with the guy in Australia. He flies down from Australia to Linton, North Dakota. I mean, of
Yep.
course, he gets to Bismarck and then from there rents a
Yeah.
car and he comes to Linton, North Dakota. He meets her. She gets into the car with him. They take off. Now, Linton, everybody knows everybody's business. Everybody knows everybody's business. So the car must have been about maybe 50 miles away from the town, and someone saw her in a with a stranger in a strange car, called the sheriff. They got him, and the girl was safe.
Mhm.
Now, he is coming from Australia to meet a 15-year-old girl.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, he was let go in 3 days. 3 days, all it took, because they could not prove that he did anything to her. Within 3 days, he was out, and I'm sure he was back in his country.
Yeah.
Um, do you think we should increase the punishment days or months or years or the sentence?
Well, there was no sentence. There's no punishment, right? So I think there's confusion oftentimes with what is bond. Bond or bail is only a promise that you're going to appear before court. There's no punishment. There's no sentence. There's no any of that. So it sounds like what he did was make bond. Beyond that, I mean, what
You
is
can
there?
make bond and fly back to your country and you say goodbye to America. Never come back again, you're good.
That's yeah, that makes complete sense. Is he supposed to leave the country? Probably not. But that would also depend on if he was on bond or if there were just no charges brought. If there's no charges brought, yeah, he can totally go home. If he's on bond, depends on the courts and the bondsman.
How can day to day people like me be of assistance to your agency or your operation?
Here, as an example, in Waco, we have an online anonymous way to report suspicious or suspicion of trafficking. And what I found was that most people would not want to call, whether it be a hotline, whether it be 911. They didn't want to call because they would always say, well, if I was wrong, I didn't want to look stupid. So basically, we're like, all right, cool. If you don't want to look stupid, if you're wrong, here's an anonymous way to do it. Right. I don't know who looks dumb. I would much rather somebody look dumb 100 times and get it right once than get it wrong 100 times and look dumb once, right?
Right.
Um, so I always tell people if you see something, I know this is an old Homeland Security deal, but if you see something, say something. If you feel like something is wrong, call. Um, I did get a call this morning that said, "Hey, I saw something similar to Wayfair, that old thing where there was an astronomically high priced pillow. I need to put this on your radar." That's false. Wayfair is nonsense. It's been proven to be complete fabrication garbage. So if you're seeing something like that, exercise a little bit of common sense. Does it make sense that a pillow has anything to do with trafficking? No, it doesn't at all. Right? It doesn't. You can't convince me that this many people are involved in some conspiracy that you're the one that found it because you found a $300 pillow. Fine, whatever. But when we look at it, the biggest thing I think for people, a lot of times we like talking about what are the signs, right? What are the signs that I'm looking for?
Yeah.
That's nonsense. It's garbage, really, if you think about it, because it may be things like you're looking for somebody who looks disheveled. Maybe they're having a bad hygiene day. You're looking for somebody who avoids eye contact. Maybe they just don't feel comfortable with eye contact. Like, I don't know. But if you know your kids and you know your peer group and you know your friends, that's when you know where something is not right. Right. So, what are the signs we look for? I know that certain friends of mine, if they look disheveled, there's a problem. Does it mean that they're being trafficked? Hopefully not, but it means something's going on. So that's when it's time for me to come in and be like, hey, I don't know what's going on, but something's up. What's going on? What can I do to help? Um, so I always tell people just kind of know your peer group, know your kids, know who you're hanging around, your friendships. It hopefully and statistically is not trafficking, but oftentimes it's something that they need to work through. So really just kind of being there, being willing to be an ear. If they are being trafficked, being willing to stand with them in that, even when that's hard. I've got friends that have been trafficked, that are survivors that have found themselves back in positions that I would never want them to be in, right? But in the same breath, I'm like, hey, I'm here. Sucks. If I could do something, I'm here. Whereas as I think in American people, we tend to kind of just back off. Not my problem. It is your problem. If they're truly your friend or they're, your family, it is your problem.
Is that local law enforcement one should call?
I would say always start with local law enforcement. There's this big misconception that federal law enforcement's where it's at. I've participated both in state and federal law enforcement over the last 10 years. Federal law enforcement is not where it's at. It's clunky. It takes time. There's all this red tape. It's everything you can imagine. Whereas small local units are able to get out very fast. If you were to call and say, we have a trafficking victim at this location, we could be there within 20 to 30 minutes. Whereas federal government, it's not going to happen. I don't care what anybody says. So, looking at who your local stakeholders are, I would always start with the local jurisdiction, whether it be police department or sheriff's office.
And this goes to every single state.
Yes, that's everywhere in the United States. I would always defer to local law enforcement before I would federal.
So,
If they need help, they will turn to the federal partners who have the more long-term game in mind. So there is a place, don't get me wrong, and there are some phenomenal federal agencies out there doing phenomenal work. But if you have something right now, I would always say local law enforcement.
once the law enforcement gets the phone call, what is the next step?
For us, if you were to tell me that you were, located at this place and you have a trafficking victim, we would load up immediately and go. Everything would be stopped at that moment to go. I don't care if that's lunch. I don't care if that's another investigation, barring something that's just immediate. We would put that up and head to wherever it is. Some agencies will take notes and follow up on it 2 weeks from now. I mean, it's difficult to say. I can tell you what the next step should be, but that doesn't mean it's happening everywhere.
So there's no fixed, there's no law that if you hear that there is a child being abused somewhere, that the agency rushes for it.
So the first time, and this is what I tell, especially law enforcement and service providers. So the first time that I called Unbound and I said, I need help right now, I'm at this hotel. They came in about 20 minutes. Now, this is years ago, right? This is 2014. Had that not happened, I would have never called them again. Had they said, hey, yeah, great. We've only got one person on right now, and she's at Chick-fil-A getting lunch, they would have never heard from me again. So the fact that an agency checks those boxes, but also shows up when it's time to show up is paramount. And not only shows up, but has the ability to solve the problem, right? Because for me, as law enforcement, and I don't say problem in the sense that the survivor or the victim is the problem. The problem is we are not designed to do something with victims. So when we come across a victim, the law enforcement design is not to be like, hey, let me get you housing.
Oh,
It's just not.
so
It's
then
to
you reach
target,
out to an agency.
yeah, that can do that. So if I call Unbound and their response is always, I can't, we can't, is the person high on marijuana? Right? Like, have a good day. I'm not calling you again.
I see.
But they, as an example, always step up. I don't care if I call it, I'm like, look, this person's high on crack right now. They're gonna find something. So, when it comes to what is the check box, what do we, a lot of people can check those and really look good on paper, but really provide absolutely nothing. So I always tell law enforcement, work with organizations. Like if they come to you, definitely work with them.
How can citizens be of help to reduce the sex crimes?
Couple things. One, report, right? So if you hear of it, if you see it, if you know of it, report it. Can't tell you how many times people tell me, well, I didn't want to get involved. It's a human being sexually abused, right? Like, what planet do you not want to be involved? So always report. If it's a minor and you're a parent and you get wind of it, do not lose your mind. This is the biggest thing. Children and adults, but primarily children, will give an outcry and they will drop a little nugget of truth to see what your reaction is going to be. If your reaction is to get on Facebook and start blasting who the trafficker is and all the things that they said and done and be stupid, that kid is not going to provide any more information. They're just not. So take what you're given as a gift, hear it, act on it if you need to, but don't act on it in a stupid way. If it's, hey, we need to report this to law enforcement, let's report it to law enforcement. If it's a, hey, let's build to this point where we can, let's do it. Obviously, if it's a kid, we need to act immediately, but be there for that person and get ready for the long haul. The other one is this, and this is always tough, especially working for a nonprofit. Donate. Like it is so difficult to get people to, I always kind of not make a joke, but it is what it is. People want to talk about how horrific trafficking is. Oh, we got to end it. We have this like hashtag save the children coffee for everybody. But I'm over here donating money to save an orca whale. You know what I mean? Like, great, I like orca whales and they're all pretty and everything. But this is also a 15-year-old kid that goes to your kid's school. Like, that being said, when you donate, big is not good. If you're looking at big organizations, there's a reason why they're big, and it's probably because of story time. Really vetting out who you're donating to. If they're generally coming forth and saying we're former 3-letter, move on. If they're coming forward and do it.
That's a great topic. So what is a day-to-day person look for in finding the right organization or the wrong organization?
Yeah, so I can tell you wrong. If they have all these war stories, they're lying, or they're greatly embellished. I can promise you that. I've been there. I've seen it for 10 years. I recently had a lady here a couple of years ago who reached out to me on social media and put me on blast. And she just was like telling me, you don't know, you're this, you're that. I volunteer for this organization. I kept telling her the organization is not good. Like, let's be very clear. It is not good. And now that the founder has been booted from the organization and is now the subject of multiple lawsuits for sexual harassment, I'll give it to her. She reached out and she's like, you were right. Right? Like, 990 forms. You can get online and find 990 forms. Where is their money going? Are there
Yeah, give me 1 second. What is a 990 form?
A 990 form is the basic, it's essentially the tax form that nonprofits have to submit to the federal government, to the IRS.
I
So
see.
you can get on you can literally Google 990 form and find searches where you can search the organizations. So if you're finding an organization that has, like, I don't know, $38 million in assets as a nonprofit, we've got a little bit of a problem. If you're finding an organization that has $7 or $8 million as a nonprofit, we've got a bit of a problem, right? Like, why do you have this much money? If you're finding that organizations are spending the overwhelming majority of their money on things that are not part of their charter, right? So we're here to provide, I'll use us as an example. We're here to provide actionable intelligence to law enforcement and work with law enforcement to counter sex trafficking. If you were to look at our 990 forms, the overwhelming majority of what we're spending money on is literally target trafficking, right? So as an example, we did an operation in Austin. You see the expense of me going to Austin. You see the results of that expense. When you have organizations making, and I'll just throw numbers out, $250,000 a year in donations, and 240,000 of those are going to salary, we have a problem. Right. And you can actually look at that, write down the budget items of these 990 forms. If they're spending a ton of money,
The 990 forms, they are broken down to salaries, expenses, taking care of kids, taking care of adults, and so on.
So the exact same as what you're like, if I was to take your personal tax return, right, and go through every line item, it's the exact same. All the line items are on there. How much they're spending in fundraising is on there.
Before you donate, you look into a 990 form of what the organization is spending the money on.
Personally, yes.
Okay.
The other big one is international. I would not support 90% of international organizations, and I'll tell you why. There's no way to vet it. I could easily say, so I go to Uganda next month, right? And I could say when I come back from Uganda, I worked deep undercover and we rescued 40 victims of child sex trafficking that were going to be like organ harvested. How are you
Wow.
going to vet? How are you going to prove that? How are you going to prove otherwise? Right? The most recent foreign country I was in was in Iraq, right? So in the Kurdish region. So if I was to come back from the Kurdish region of Iraq and tell you that um, while we were there, Iran was conducting drone strikes and we rescued 20 victims of human trafficking. Is Iran dropping drones? They are. Did they drop them in our immediate vicinity? Of course not. Can I say in good faith? Um, I went and I sat in a disco and I observed 20 people that I believe to be victims of human trafficking. And I told the police. Does that mean I rescued them? Nope. What if the police come in the next day and they say, you know what? Club is shut down. Nobody else can come in here. Unemployed. Everybody here, get out. Which happens.
Right.
Did I just rescue 20 victims of human trafficking? You'll never be able to say otherwise. Right. So when organizations are spending a lot of time in foreign countries and they're doing a lot of like quote work in foreign countries, I question it. I question that because there's no process or way to vet that. And in many of these countries, if I pay you the right amount of money, you're going to say what I want you to say anyway. So if I'm turning around and I'm using donor money
You
to
have
pay
fun.
off cops, pay off the judiciary, pay off prosecutors with donor funding, I could say whatever I want. And there's nothing that you're going to do to prove otherwise. In fact, they're going to support me.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
So 990 forums and a lot of foreign quote outreach or operations would be my two biggest red flags from the word go.
So, as a citizen, I make a phone call to the local police department. That's number one. Number
Yes.
two, if I want to help and it has touched me and I feel horrible about this, instead of going and giving a donation to horses or whales, I
Yeah.
I go and donate to an organization. But before I do that, I go look at the 990 form, which is publicly available on the internet. What
Yep.
is my next step, Joseph? As you being in the law enforcement, what are the right channels to go after to help. We are thinking, not thinking, but we. I just created a film called Before They Vanish. It was about a horse, a survivor who comes back from Vietnam, gets a due to Agent Orange, gets cancer, um, and comes back and he purchases one horse. Then today he's got 300 horses, and he's dying, and we don't know what to do with the horses. Like he doesn't have
Yeah.
land to put it on. So I said, okay, let's create a firm and we'll donate percentage. And we donated a large 49%. It wasn't 10 or 15%, it was 49%.
Yeah.
We are thinking of doing exactly the same with our film Trapped. Um, we don't know yet whether we should donate to a organization, few organizations, directly to the victims. We haven't decided that. We don't even know what percentage, because we
Yeah.
don't know what percentage of the film we want to donate. And that's one of the reasons why I'm asking you this question is, making a phone call, that to me I think is easy. Local reinforcement, we call the police, you speak to them. Donation, that becomes a little tricky. I don't haven't you know in the case of the other film, I knew the owner. I knew the or know the owner of the horses. I know what's going to happen to the horses once he dies. So that was easy. It wasn't going through an organization. But in this case, we don't know. So
Yeah.
that's a good tip that you've given, to go look at the 990, and I think that would help us quite a bit. What else can other citizens do to reduce this, or help you guys reduce this in the United States?
I think one of the bigger things that we haven't touched on is start believing people, right? So when somebody says, "Hey, I've been trafficked," when somebody says, "Hey, I've been sexually abused, I've been sexually assaulted," quit making excuses. We're really good about that.
I have something to speak to you about that.
Okay.
So I started making this film, and since the film story generated from Linton, because I met a girl in Linton who spoke to me about her life and what happened to her. That's where, so I said, okay, let's go film in Linton itself. Before this, I never spoke with anyone, but now since I'm making a film, everyone I'm making a, come across, and I speak a lot. So everyone I come across, I'm making a film on sex trafficking, and this is what is happening. I have to tell you this: 3 out of 5 girls, women, have told me that they've been sex abused, sexually
Mhm.
abused. 3 out of 5. And I've spoken to strangers at the airports, bus stops, train stations, random shopping, anyone and everyone that I speak to. 3 out of 5.
Yeah.
So when you say believe them, I'm human, and I just don't know how it could be such a big number. 3 out of 5. You're looking at 60%.
I've posed some questions to the public, and the overwhelming response that I get is, "What did she do? What did she do? What was her, whatever? Why did she cause this? On what planet?" I don't care if you feed a woman 5 bottles of vodka, put her naked in front of me, and say, "Have a good night." On no planet does that make anything excusable. None. But men and women who are also sexually assaulted, will be the first ones to ask what the other woman did to be sexually assaulted. And I know of no answer. I know of no response that makes that okay. Not one. There's not a single one. Well, she did, therefore. I cannot think of one. So when we look at social media as an example, a police department may put on social media. I challenge you to look at this, right? So they'll put on two different things. One are a bunch of women arrested for prostitution. 85% of them are probably trafficking victims, but we'll say they'll put 100 women for prostitution. The responses on social media will be, "Ah ha ha, I wouldn't spend $5 on her. She's ugly. Ha ha ha, these dirty old, whatever. Ha ha ha, oldest profession in the book. Ha ha ha, whatever." Put 100 men on there. What a waste of taxpayer dollars. Why are we spending our time with two consenting adults? This is a waste of police, time, blah, blah, blah. We do nothing but blame women, nothing. And that's coming from men and women, right? I kind of anticipated men would blame women more. I don't know. From what I've seen, it's about 50-50. And I'm even talking about women that I've had conversation with that have said that woman should have never done that. That's why she was sexually abused. But I was sexually abused because of these decisions that I made, that you made. How about the abuser? Abusers abuse, right? Like, no. So when we look at what we can do as a general public, start believing people, start condemning it. Quit making excuses for it. Quit making excuses as to why women and men are sold. Quit making excuses as to this is the oldest profession in the book. No, it's not. Let's be real. That's just some stupid man-made, made-up thing. What are we doing as a society to excuse it? And whatever we're doing to excuse it, make it no longer acceptable. And I don't think until we do that as a society are we ever going to be able to fix this. And that goes down to the general public too, right? Like, let's quit talking about the problem child, runaway 15-year-old who got drunk. I'm not saying that that's okay, but what I'm saying is she should be able to do that without
Why did she
anticipating
run
being,
away?
yeah, why did she run away? Why is she drinking? Why is she doing these things? And what we need to focus on, and this is going to sound wrong for half a second, so let me finish. We need to quit focusing on women. We are so focused on women, and it's getting us nowhere. We need to focus on men. Men pay for sex. Men and boys are the ones that are selling women. Men and boys are the ones that are raping women. Yet we don't focus on them. We tell women, don't wear that. Don't touch her. Like, that's pretty simple. We need to learn self-defense. Guess what? If you don't have rapers raping, you don't have to learn that. Like, I mean, you know, let's stop focusing so much attention on what the actions of women and potential victims are and focus our attention on what perpetrators are doing and what we as men are doing.
Make donations to the right organizations with looking up the 990. Stop blaming women. Call law enforcement. Focus on men for what they do. Give me a fifth tip, Joseph. We don't have much time, but I think we can get one more out of you. Please.
Again, going back, just know the people around you, know your kids, know their behavior, know what's going on. Um, Exercise leadership. It's not hard to go volunteer at a school. It's not hard to volunteer at these youth camps. It's not hard to volunteer at Little League baseball, basketball, football. Like, be a mentor, and whether that be to show women and girls their worth, whether that be to show men and boys what they should be doing. We have to start young, and getting out there with kids is where we're going to start really solving that. We're not going to solve this problem in my lifetime. We're not going to solve it in yours. Probably not going to solve it in my kids. But can we set it up to solve it that next generation? I think we can. And we have to play the long game versus the short game. So I think, again, just being involved in the lives of kids is where the biggest impact long term is going to come.
That is great advice to us, and thank you so much for doing what you do, risking your lives,
Yeah.
you and your team. We thank everybody. How does one get in touch with you? So if you want to give your email address or your website, um, because
Yeah.
what I understand is you are still in law enforcement, but at the same time you're working with another agency to secure and protect them as well. So
Yeah. So I transitioned to an organization called Skull Games. You can find us at www.skullgames, SKULLGAMES.io. From there, you can link to my email. You can reach out through there. Aside from that, McLennan, McLennan County Sheriff's Office. They still have active creds there, active email. You can go to our website. On that end is co.mclennan.tx.us, and there's information for anti-trafficking, information to get in touch with us. Same thing.
We do see your hat in and out. It's getting cut. There you go. That is not a game, people. That is not some kind of a web game or a game.
No,
It says Skull Games. I think the pun of that is mind games.
it's
And
mind games. Yeah, that's where we came from. It's definitely not a game. We are out there, assisting law enforcement, working, active cases. But yeah, it comes from a trafficker named Iceberg Slim. Again, he had a quote that said, "Pimping is not a sex game; it's a skull game," and that's how we got the name.
Joseph, thank you so much for coming on and
Thank you.
sharing your knowledge with all of us, my audience, myself. I learned a lot, and we really appreciate what you do. We appreciate and really think that you guys are super special.
And thank you for sharing, what you're finding and for getting out there and doing the work.